This is your daily real estate syndication show, and I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today is a highlight show that's packed with value from different guests around a specific topic. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but also go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can sign up to start investing in real estate today. I hope you enjoy the show. Our guest is Ryan Narus. Thanks for being on the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan is a double graduate of Wake Forest University with an undergraduate in psychology and an MBA. Frustrated with the golden handcuffs of corporate America, Ryan set out to build a portfolio of mobile home parks. But here's the thing. He started with nothing, no money, no network, and no experience. And that's exactly where a lot of us have felt or are feeling right now. And probably a lot of the listeners can relate to that. But flash forward 5 years, and Ryan has purchased 15 mobile home parks spanning roughly 1,441 lots and is financially free, successfully escaping corporate America. Ryan, grateful to have you on the show. I know you and I met a while back, and so pleasure to just hear more about your story. I know the listeners want to know how you did this and want to just share with them how you became financially free and help them with some steps to get there as well. Because when you're starting with nothing, you know, like your bio mentioned, it seems hopeless almost, right? It seems like there's just no way to get there, or where do we even turn? So, but welcome to the show. Give us a little more about who you are, maybe your focus right now. But I want to dive into just how you became financially free and help the listeners as well.
Sure. So, just to kind of start with the present. So, like you mentioned, I have been a part of 15 mobile home park transactions. I currently have 3 under contract and 2 verbal agreements to price. So, I should have several more under contract. It snowballs. It starts really slow. You question what you're doing over and over again. And if you have a very stubborn wife like I do, who I love very much, she will also be like, what are you doing? This is stupid and is not going to work. So just want to start where I'm at. By anyone who isn't familiar with the mobile home park space, or anyone who's hearing my voice for the first time, like I started like most of you. I mean, I had nothing. I had more student loan debt than cash. I bought the lie, Whitney. I bought the lie that the counselors in schools tell us growing up as a millennial. Oh, study really hard, and then you'll go to a great school. And then after you graduate from that great school, you'll get a great job, and you work really hard on at that job. You'll get promoted, and then one day you'll retire on a beach. Well, here's how that actually looks. You miss out a lot of your childhood because you're stressed out trying to get good grades. You get into a good school. I went to Wake Forest University, good school. You rack up student loan debt, you graduate, the job market is not as great as you would think it is, even if you go to a pretty good school. I mean, this is what happens when you go to a good school and you go into a job interview. Wow, Wake Forest University, great, I don't care. That's the fact that it's like, oh, wow, cool, you went to a good school. Kind of check in that box. Let's see what else you can do for us. Oh, you're not going to work for next to nothing? Like, I'm not, okay, yeah. So, I mean, it's like, it's so frustrating. And then you finally find a job. And then you feel stuck in that job because you get married to a lifestyle, a middle-class lifestyle, and you get stuck in this job, just, trying to get promoted and impress your boss and politic your way up. And it's unfulfilling. And you're
in that hamster wheel.
It's horrible. And I just, I ended up doing everything that I thought I was supposed to do. And I wasn't happy. And then I quit my job to chase my dreams. I more than halved my salary, lost 401k, lost benefits, literally moved into a double wide mobile home. And I lost 15 pounds by changing nothing about what I was doing. I was not working out. I was not eating any better. I just removed the depression from my life, which was working to make someone else rich in an unfulfilling job. So if you get nothing else out of this interview, it should be that once you find what you're meant to do, you will find that all of this like middle-class lifestyle that you think you're addicted to and can't let go of doesn't make you happy. And literally moving into like a mobile home will skyrocket your happiness. And you may even lose some weight.
That is awesome. No, I love how, you just put it right out there because it's so true. I've seen it so many times, including myself, having the job that you think you're going to keep promoting, keep moving up. And then you finally realize, well, is that really what I want? Is that really what's best? But congratulations to you, Ryan, for just recognizing that and been taking that hard leap. And I'd like to just talk about that a little bit. I love focusing on that a little bit because I know there's so many listeners that are, wanting to do that same thing, thinking about that and the repercussions of that. Is it worth it? Can we do it? Do they have faith to make that happen just in themselves, in their ability? Maybe they're even their support, like you're talking about, your spouse, maybe your spouse is not on board, that alone is such a good topic. Maybe you could speak to as well.
Sure.
But let's talk through that transition just a little bit. You quit, you moved into a mobile home park, and it was a great decision. Obviously, now looking back, right, that's easy to say, but speak to that transition a little bit, some difficulties there. I know you mentioned, your wife was questioning, this decision. How did you do that? How did you make that commitment? How did you work through some of those things?
So what I don't want to do right now, Whitney, is give you a highlight reel. I love watching ESPN's top 10, but the truth of the matter is there's so much omitted from that highlight reel that's really relevant to your audience. So if you don't mind, what I would like to actually start with is by going back to 2012. So in 2012, I had just hit, I was working for Honda, selling Hondas, and I had just hit their gold award, which is like the highest award you can get out of the gate. So that was after my first full fiscal year. So I sold like 240 cars. So it's like 20 cars a month. I got this award. And I just remember going to Washington, D.C. to be celebrated. Oh, look at you. Great. And it's like a pat on the back and then it's like, go do it again. And I just remember
but feeling do twice as much, right?
Oh my gosh. I just remember feeling so unfulfilled. Like it just was not worth it. And what I did was I went, it's time for a change. I was 24 years old and I was like, it's time for a change. And so what I did was I just picked up any book I could read. I heard somewhere that the average American CEO reads 50 books a year. So I went, all right, book a week. We're going to do it. And I did exactly that. And it completely opened up my mind. I mean, Rich Dad, Poor Dad alone, if that was the only book I read that year, just completely, because my dad was the poor dad, even though he had a PhD in the works. What I kind of realized through that, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek, all of those, was that I needed to find who I was. So Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. And after spending quite literally hours and hours and hours reading, changing my mindset, I realized I needed to meet everyone I could possibly meet. And over the course of 3 years, so from 2012 to 2015, and by the way, all the while I'm developing skills, how to negotiate, how to sell, how to persuade while I'm selling cars. Over the course of 3 years, I looked at over 100 businesses that I could possibly start. A lot of dead ends over the course of 3 years. I actually started a couple businesses that went nowhere. And then in the summer of 2015, I found mobile home parks. And then in the summer of 2017, I finally went full time. So it took me 3 years of a lot of reading, a lot of networking, a lot of soul searching. Then it took me 2 years, one of which to prove I could actually make money in mobile home parks and another to actually plan to go full time. So when you're listening in and you're like, oh, well, like I really want to do this. I'm going to quit my job. Don't do that. Spend quite literally a year. You're going to feel so stuck, like you're getting nowhere. But if you just learn, network, and self-assess really, really hard, find out what really makes you happy. So then that one moment where it's time to make a sacrifice, you are ready. So if you're hearing this, I really hope that what you're taking away is this took Ryan like 5+ years to get to the moment. And when you're at that moment, by the way, you prepare, like, let's use jumping off the diving board because I'm afraid of heights. So it's a good example. Let's use jumping off the diving board as an example. You don't just walk up to a diving board and jump off, right? You got to know how to swim. You got to put on your suntan lotion if you're like me and you burn really easily. You got to have your swimsuit on, the works, right? It can't be adult swim. And then when you get to the diving board, you got to have a plan, right? Like, okay, I'm going to jump here. I'm going to take a running start. I'm going to swim to this ladder here after I jump, right? So you have to have some kind of plan. And then you have the fear management piece. And to me, that was a really difficult thing going full time, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to over half my salary. I'm going to take out recourse debt, by the way. So like everything I've ever worked for is gone if I fail here. And it was really scary thinking about that. But you know what happened, Whitney? You know what pushed me over the edge where I went, I don't care, is because I think I got to credit Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for this, or maybe it was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. One of the two basically puts this, or maybe it was Susan Jeffers' feel the fear and do it anyway. Someone somewhere in a book I read was like, think about being 80 years old, thinking back on this moment. What are you going to say at 80, thinking back on this moment? And I said to myself, if I fail at, I was 29 years, was I 20? I had just turned 30. Okay. At 80 and 50 years, if I think back to how I failed epically at 30, would I be miserable on my deathbed thinking about that? Oh man, I wish I had stayed working for the big bank. Or would I go, you know what? I failed epically. I went bankrupt. I lost everything I had, but boy, did I have some courage back then. And at 80 years old, I think if I think back, at that moment, I was like, if I think back to this and I failed epically, I'm going to be so proud I took a chance and took a bet on myself. And not only that, in that same vein, I thought, because I didn't have kids at the time, I'm a father now. I went, you know what? I'm a big believer of do what I do, not just what I say, or whatever that cliche is. I said, what better lesson for my child than to say, you know what I did? I listened to my counselors growing up and the people around me, and they were wrong. Okay. I bought the lie. But instead of playing the victim card, going, oh man, you know what? Like I did all this and now I'm stuck in this. I said, you know what? I'm not going to play the victim. I'm going to go out and get what I want. And whether or not it worked is irrelevant, because I'm proud of myself for making that leap. I'm proud of myself from jumping off the diving board. And I just cannot think of a better lesson to teach my children beyond doing what I had done, having courage and going out there and doing it. And that I really hope, if you're listening in and you're at the precipice of going full time or wondering if you go full time and you're trying to get over that fear thing, I'll point you in 2 directions. Number one, what your 80-year-old self would say about you. And I bet your 80-year-old self is going to be really proud you had courage. And number 2, your kids, because there's no better way to teach your kids to not have a spoiled or victim mindset than going, daddy felt the same way. And daddy found that what he had to do was take a bet on himself. And that's exactly what he did. And even though it didn't work out, that's the mindset you have to have. And guess what? If it works out, then even better. Now you're not stuck in corporate America anymore.
Some great advice, Ryan. Wow. I just love the story. Even just that line that you read, you mentioned, what are you going to say about this decision when you're 80 years old, or the decision you didn't make, or not making a decision is making a decision, right?
Yep.
Or deciding to stay in that rat race and decide to stay where you think you're comfortable and where everyone else, thinks you should stay as well. I had to make those same decisions. Very similar story of jumping out and committing everything ultimately, in the beginning to make it happen, or risking everything, right? But yeah, no doubt about it. Such good advice. What about the family support?
Sure.
During those hard times, what did that look like? How did you handle that through, making this big leap?
Yeah, my wife hated it. To put it bluntly, actually what ended up happening was, so imagine this, you spend years quite literally looking for the business that you want to start, because I knew I was meant to be a business owner, and you finally find it. And you get home to your wife and you're like, guess what? I know what I'm supposed to be when I grow up. And she's like, excuse me? In so many words, F you and F that. Imagine just having cold water thrown all over yourself. And now discovering that you have 2 battles. Number one, trying to get a company from scratch with no money, no network, and no experience off the ground. And number 2, trying to win your wife over in the process. It was really, really, really hard, especially because what I love about my wife is she has a lot of conviction and she's stubborn in the right way. So in other words, like I think Jeff Bezos said this, or someone famous said, I picked my wife because if I got locked in some jail in a third world country, she has so much conviction and fight in her, she would get me out. She'd find a way. And that's what I love about my wife, which is great when your incentives align. And when they don't, it's really tough. So she was very much so not a fan of this. We had some really serious fights. And eventually I won her over. And believe it or not, she's actually going to go and buy her own mobile home park on her own. I am not invited, by the way. So it's come very full circle. And anyone who's listening in, if your significant other does not buy in, don't let that be a hurdle. Don't let you think that's going to be always. You can, if you love each other, you'll find a way to make it work. And I invited my wife onto my podcast. Our second episode is literally called Spousal Buyin. And I basically gave my wife 2 rules. I went, you have an open mic, 2 rules. Don't give away any of my secrets and no bad words. And she absolutely lights me up over the course of like 10 minutes. And then the last 5, it's a 15-minute episode. And in the last 5 minutes, we kind of have a great talk about marriage through the lens of entrepreneurship. So if you are feeling like you are fighting an uphill battle against your significant other, trying to win them over, that is an episode worth listening to, because it is so honest, and they will understand how my wife felt in that moment. And they will understand, like, it's like that whole feel, felt, found bit in sales, right? So like, you feel this way. My wife felt the same way, and she found a way to overcome that, and together, and actually coming out with our marriage being stronger than when it started. So if you're listening in, that's definitely something I'd point you to go listen to, my podcast episode with my wife. But just know, if you don't have time to go listen to that if you have a good marriage, it's like any other disagreement you have. If you love each other, love will find a way.
Our guest is Jonathan Tuttle. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about your fund a little bit, your parks, and what's happened over the last year, we'll say, maybe where you were at, last November, December, and then compared to March and then June, and, kind of walk us through what, how COVID, affected your properties and mobile home parks specifically.
Well, it's definitely, it's kind of shocked everyone in this world. That's the first thing. I feel bad for some asset classes. Unfortunately, over the last 50 years, mobile home parks have been the lowest default rate based on bank data. Self-storage was a close second, but they actually got affected this year also because they got overbuilt. It's another, I like all asset classes in some way or form, but the one advantage to us is for our parks, we didn't see maybe 1 or 2 people paid like a couple weeks late, but then again, our average rent's $300 for our personal parks, and they had the stimulus, which helped. And even if that didn't come, we have a mostly senior park, so they get the Social Securities, and then like their rent to expense ratio is way below it. So that's one of the advantage of this industry is we have a lot of the focus is on seniors, and the baby boomers is 10,000 retiring every day. They usually, just on Social Security is small savings. We're the only affordable option. And if you look at how government looks at when if you went to get a house, you want to have 1/3 payment down. Is basically they want to see that spread. We're 1/3 of apartment price, or 1/2 apartment, 1/3 of a house. So even if it's $300 or $400 lot rent, or if they work $10 an hour, we still serve that need. And there was just a study, I don't know by the time you see this, but about 3 days ago or 6 days ago now, Green Street, which does data for all the commercial real estate assets, pretty much all institutional data. And industrial and mobile home parks are the only 2 that have actually gone up in value this year. We've gone up about 8%. And you've seen double digits negative for obviously like malls, because of e-commerce, and you can't go in the mall, retail, lodging, some other asset classes that were like 6 to 8% in decrease in value, and we've seen an 8% increase in value. So it's just been fascinating to see, like, this is what we've been preaching for the last couple of years, that we are recession resilient, or at least the last 10 years. And now we actually have, the data that backs it up. Wall Street Journal did an article in February of this year, 2020, by the time it's there, previous year, but since the last downturn, mobile home parks were the best performing real estate asset class. It's a Wall Street Journal article. It mainly just comes down to supply and demand. There's 60 million Americans who need affordable housing. There's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. People are, the spending power, inflation, all that works to our advantage. And we're the only thing that could solve that problem. And the only problem is there's only 12 million mobile homes and 44,000 lots. So there's this huge demand, but there's not enough supply.
And they're not really building more mobile home parks, right?
Correct. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, and once you have one, it's kind of like, it's like a gold mine, basically. You want to solve the affordable housing, provide a ethical, safe place to live and fair pricing. You still have to maintain it. Like, there's still costs involved with it, obviously. Because when you tell some people like, oh, that's so much lot rent for that. But well, yeah, we have to maintain the grounds. We have to maintain the sewer lines. We have to maintain all that. And plus we pay the bulk of the taxes. So if these get torn down, which is about a certain percentage get torn down every year, people don't have a place to live. So we look at it as like, hey, we're providing an affordable place. We do the CapEx when you come in. We make sure the improvements bring more amenities, bring everything up to speed, and they have a better quality of life. And we're really passionate about that, but also serving that affordable housing. And there was also, I forgot what data was, that 93% collection of rent during the worst part of COVID of March and April institutional data. So when everything else, I heard some like certain asset classes got down to 70, 75. It was about a 93% collection rate based on the data. Wells Fargo did a report on that too, as well, their commercial lending.
Yeah. Well, can you just speak a little more? Was there a way that your fund or your parks were better prepared for a downturn or better prepared for COVID? I know mobile home parks, in general, you talk about, how they're just more resilient, but anything that, were there anything specific that you were doing even beforehand that have helped you to just minimize, any kind of internal downturn, for in those parks?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So at Midwest Park Capital, and our parks personally too, we always try to buy parks that are more like we don't want turnaround parks. We're not trying to come in and say, hey, we got to completely turn it around. Like, there's obviously opportunity for it and there's a lot of upside, but it's a lot more boots in the ground and just more work and running out all the units and bringing in new units. We try to identify like better opportunities. They're already well positioned. They're already top tier. Demand the parks that people really demand. We're not trying to get a park that's in the middle of nowhere with no chance of getting the residents in there, and there is parks like that. So first, acquiring the right park. Second, like when you look at parks, do the correct due diligence, and it's a whole long process. I don't want to go into too details on that, but make sure you do the correct due diligence. Marketing, we use a lot of like Facebook marketing. Marketing really makes difference because we're competing with a lot of mom and pops, like I mentioned, it's mostly mom and pops. And most of them don't know how to use Facebook. So if everyone is on Facebook now, I don't know how many billions of people are on Facebook, Facebook Marketplace is free way to market, units. And it was really, really effective. And it's very if you're not paying anything for it, you can boost it. But most of the time you just put it on there and you get 20, 30 calls on a unit if you're selling or renting them. So just having that, especially now with everyone in COVID, they're online looking at properties. You'd be surprised. Like I've even had like 65, 7-year-olds like, oh, thank you. I saw that in Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, so everyone's on it. You're just getting in front of more audiences and able to keep the parks maintained and keep the demand there. And then just being really efficient with the management.
Yeah. What are some maybe different things that you do, when managing your properties that maybe other mobile home park operators do not, that just help you to stand out or rise above?
Yeah, we use a third-party manager called M. Shapiro. They're the biggest operator. They've got 35,000 lots. They manage Apollo's groups as well, which is one of the biggest private equities in the world, plus a 30-year history. So having the right team, we have a seasoned park CPA that he works in another fund, but has been in it for 20 years. Having really like an all-star team and not just, not cutting corners, making sure we have an all-star team, everything from the management to the CPA. And then, like I said, it comes down to like acquiring parks. It's a lot of industry relationships. I've been in the space 15 years. Supposed to be one of the speakers in the National Expo with Dr. Ben Carson, and then the Clayton Homes, which is the biggest manufacturer of mobile homes. One of those is one of the 12 speakers this year, but obviously COVID went to digital, and digital was like a small segment. So hopefully I'll be on the speaking stage next year. But what that means is I have a lot of industry relationships. So we get deals that people don't see. Like a lot of the stuff, because it is supply and demand, they want to work with people they like and trust and been in the business. It's a lot easier for somebody like us to get better deals and somebody just come into space like, hey, I heard about mobile parks and we put the years in, so they trust us now. They're playing catch up to us. So
nice. No, yeah. I mean, the team is so important in whatever business you're in, especially in real estate. What you said, who is the management company again?
M. Shapiro. They're out of Michigan.
Nice. What's your criteria now for when you're finding a mobile home park? Is there specific sizes, locations? What are you just anywhere in the country? How are you finding those deals, and what's your criteria?
Yeah, for Midwest Park Capital, we focus on 75 to 250 units. It's better for scale of economics, efficiencies. We like Midwest. Midwest has about a 1 to 2 points at a minimum higher cap rate. As coastal cities is more institutional private equity, and like they're bidding it down. Obviously, they have access to capital way cheaper than we can. So we focus in the Midwest. We also like Tennessee and Texas because, the growing economies, people are flocking there in droves. So we like the Midwest focus for that reason. 75 250. Most of the parks we're acquiring is 1970 to 1990 because there really hasn't been that many developments, as you alluded to, in the last 20, 30 years. It's almost impossible to develop it from its ground up. And the problem with ground up development, if you get one of the few people a year that gets it, luckily, you're basically developing a subdivision from the ground up. You're not buying a cash flowing asset. Like if you buy an apartment building or you buy a self-storage and they already have tenants in place and rent rolls coming in, you're literally building up, putting $80,000 per pad, plus the info, the marketing, the approval. You're not even making a profit for like 3 or 4 years. And we're trying to be, our philosophy is let's buy something that's cash flowing right now, prove the efficiencies. If we could mention build back the water and sewer, that's one way, huge way if it's allowed to increase the NOI. Also, just really bringing marketing efficiencies and management efficiencies, and that really separates it. Because remember, a lot of these people that have owned it have for 30, 40 years, and sometimes they're living in a small town or tertiary market. They have like a $4 or $5 million mobile home that they've paid off. They're making $400,000 or $500,000 revenue. They're not sitting here trying to maximize it every little dollar. Sometimes they haven't raised the rent in like 15 years because they're like, I already have $500,000. I live in a town where the average income is like 30 grand. Like they don't need those to maximize it.
Nice. No, that's some great criteria. I appreciate you just elaborating on that. And it's economies of scale, 75 to 250 units for sure. You mentioned, or I think just in some, before we even started recording the show, you mentioned, just like the most popular real estate niche in 2021. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm going to be writing an article in Forbes about this. It's literally just the supply and demand. We're seeing so much migration from other asset classes and people inquiring from, if they're in retail, especially retail, hospitality, and lodging. We're seeing like, hey, it almost feels like they're quiz nest of like they could start their own, but it's because they've been, so affected by COVID, unfortunately. And we just have the supply and demand to our advantage. It's got some unique oddities to it. The whole thing we want to do is basically just own the land and rent the units out. And when you have less to work with, it makes it a lot more efficient. There's still challenges. People say, oh, you just want land, but no, there's still challenges. Still got to market. You still have to train the staff correctly. The hidden challenges are like if trees fall down, so you have to make sure the trees aren't coming down on the houses. Like that's a big issue. If they're not tree trims, all of a sudden it comes down in this mobile home. It's basically just like a shoebox. There's no load bearing walls on the inside. It's just like the outside. To come down, you have to basically replace the unit. It's gone. But I mean, then that's when you as an experienced operator, that you come in first thing you do, and you also use that in your price negotiation. Like, hey, these trees haven't been trimmed for 20 years. That's going to cost, X per tree based on what it is. We need to knock this price down.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.